Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Masur. I am co-editor of the Journal of the Civil War Era, and I'm here today with Greg Downs, also co-editor of the journal, and Katy Shively, our journal's book review editor. And we're here today to talk about book reviewing for the journal. So before we get started, I'm going to let you know what our topics are today. First, we're going to talk about what the purposes are of book reviews in the Journal of the Civil War Era and in the larger profession. Then we'll talk about the journal's particular requirements to serve as a reviewer and processes like how we select books and how the process works from start to finish. We'll then describe what makes a good book review. We'll talk about why we should make time in our busy schedules to review books. And finally, we'll talk about some of the sticky issues that come up in book review etiquette. So let's get underway. Katy Shively, what is the purpose of book reviews in the Journal of the Civil War Era, and what purpose do the reviews serve in the broader profession?
Well, thank you for that introduction, Kate. I think there's a few different issues to look at here. The first is that book reviews are a central component of peer review, which is, of course, one of the major things that defines academic work as distinct from other types of knowledge production. And the Journal of the Civil War Era is a central vehicle for knowledge production in the American mid-19th century fields. So it's proper that it would robustly participate in peer review of monographs. Another issue to consider here as the purpose of book reviews is that for monographs are really central to scholarly careers and bodies of work, especially for junior scholars who rely on book reviews as ways to disseminate their main scholarly arguments, and of course to achieve tenure promotion if they're on that kind of traditional academic track. And I think we all know also that with our limited time, sometimes the only way that we will connect with any given monograph is through reading a book review. So they are very important for those reasons. And I think the last thing that sort of goes through my mind is that particularly for junior scholars or a scholar at any phase who's kind of entering into a new area of study, this is a way to get out that information that they are creating knowledge in a particular area. And please feel free
That's
to add
great.
anything.
And we've got, thanks so much, Katy. So next question is this. How does the process work? What do we require as a journal of its reviewers? What are their basic requirements? How do you choose which books are selected? And how does the process work from start to finish? Can we demystify some of those questions for some of our...
Yeah, thanks for that question, Greg. I do think it's important to have transparency. And I think that when it comes to book review editing, there isn't necessarily a lot of knowledge about how this process works. So first, just to say the requirements for the journal, in order to review a book for the Journal of the Civil War Era, you either need to have completed your PhD, earned the PhD, or you need to have published a peer review research article in a journal of equal status to the Journal of the Civil War Era. And those requirements are in place because in our journal, it's very important that a book be properly situated in the historiography and that the reviewer can really identify the major contributions of the book. So that's kind of the bar to review. How are books selected? Well, that really falls on the book review editor to do. I have to scour presses catalogs each season and sort of look at social media and other kinds of sources like that to try to find books that relate to the Civil War and Reconstruction, slavery and emancipation, and other broad topics that, inform us about the mid-19th century, such as immigration, the West. So it's really I have to cast a very wide net. And it can be difficult to make sure that I find all of the books that are coming out at any given time. So I did want to say, if you're watching this video and you are publishing a book, it's a good idea to tell your press that you would like to contact journals like the Journal of the Civil War Era to make sure your book is reviewed. I welcome emails, even from authors, just letting me know that their book is on the horizon. That can be very helpful because there's so many. From there, we only publish 60 reviews per year. So not every book that is relevant to America in the mid-19th century can be reviewed. And, I try to do the best I can to identify those books that are really kind of fit the time period, the geographic place we're looking at, and also that are really advancing new knowledge. And then the next stage in the process is I reach out to experts in the particular fields of a given book and try to solicit a reviewer. That stage takes a while. Sometimes it takes many emails to secure a reviewer. And then the reviewer gets about 10 weeks to review. And then the review is returned and goes into copy editing. We do our best to try to get book reviews out in print within a year and a half of when a book comes out. But actually, it's quite difficult to meet that window because the process is so long. And I just kind of would cap that by saying the slowest part of the process is often finding a reviewer for a book. So if you're ever contacted by a book review editor, make sure that you respond immediately, even if your answer is no. It is a great help in moving the ball forward in this process. But that's the process in a nutshell.
That's great, and I think that helped set us up to the next question. So having talked about how you learn about books and select and send requests out, let's talk about what comes back. When you look at reviews, what to you makes for a good review? What are the attributes that some of the reviews that you're particularly proud of, either as author or editor? What are the attributes that they share? What should people aspire toward?
Yes, well, obviously I've read hundreds of reviews, and I'll read reviews from any journal just to kind of see them because I'm interested in the genre. And of course, one of the first things that comes to mind, I'm sure, to everyone is stating the argument of the book clearly. However, I would add to that, if you can really put the argument in the context of the fields that the book is addressing, right? So be smart about how you're talking about historiography. Every review should have historiography in it. But the way you should address it is not simply, this other scholar said this, and this book is saying that. But really, if you can give a statement on, the state of the field, where things fit in, how this is moving the field forward. And remember that when I select a reviewer, I've chosen you because you have distinct expertise. And if you can really think about how to bring your expertise to bear in the review and contribute to knowledge through your review, then I think you're achieving the height of what we're looking for. I would say that I recommend that you take pride in your review, that it's a published piece of your scholarship. And oftentimes for, a scholar who's starting out, it may be one of your first publications. And so really think about the fact that you're putting your scholarship out there when you are reviewing a book. And so doing that, you want to summarize not just kind of generally the text, this chapter says this, then that chapter says that, and plotting through, but instead you want to really focus on argumentation. What are the main arguments? What are the main analytical points? How are they advancing knowledge? How can you connect them to the broader fabric of scholarly knowledge that you know about? And then I'd say that you do want to talk about things like structure and scope, but don't overdo it. Again, you don't need to go chapter by chapter per se, but saying, what is the coverage of a book is important. And then comes the critique part. Some scholars are very reticent about providing a critique of a book, but it's a fundamental part of a review. And critique is not being mean, right? If you find yourself being nasty, that's a different story. We can talk about that later. But offering a critique is fundamental to the review. And the best way to offer a critique is by operating within the framework that the author has given in their book. So if you feel there's an omission, ask yourself, does the omission fit within their framework? Did they really miss something within their framework that they've laid out? And if so, is that detrimental to their argument? Or is it just something you think is cool and you wish was in there, right? So think about a critique that is really valid based on what they have put together as their piece, rather than here's the book I wish they had written because it's what I'm interested in, right? So that's where the line is with critique. And then I think my final recommendation is that, think of this as a miniature professional essay. Frame it with a hook if you can. Make it interesting, make it readable. For me, strangely enough, one of my proudest moments as a scholar was when a senior scholar whom I very much admired, I was an assistant professor at the time, they came up to me and they said, I read your review in the JCWE of my book, and it was really well done. You really captured what the book was about. I read other reviews and it was just kind of a throwaway. And this person, said that, and I thought, wow, I really have taken pride in my review. So it's a good feeling. See if you can achieve that for yourself.
Well, thanks so much. And so, it sounds like part of what you're saying is that writing book reviews is part of professional process. It's something that's incredibly helpful for the field, but it's also a way of practicing writing about your own perspective on the field and things that you care about as a scholar. So just to put a very fine point on it, because we're all very busy and it's really hard to make time very often to do this, tell us why people should make time in their busy schedules to write book reviews, at least from time to time.
Yeah, I certainly understand how busy we all are. But I would ask that, scholars think about doing at least one, maybe two, if you can muster the time, book reviews per year, keeping in mind that the vital act of peer review is essential to the health of our fields. People rely on their books being reviewed to further their careers, to make their names out there, to really feel like they're part of the community. And we also deeply need to assess our fields to keep them healthy and just to inform each other about how our knowledge is growing and changing and the directions. And then another point I'd make on this topic is, we, especially at the Journal, we're working to create a really inclusive atmosphere. So we need scholars to review of all different identities, all different career stages, a variety of job types, right? We're not only looking to those who have academic appointments, but also people who are independent scholars, public historians who can meet our criteria. So just keeping in mind the need for and the benefits that come from a real inclusivity in our practices. So, if you are at a conference and you have the opportunity to introduce yourself to a book review editor, please do so. I know that I personally would never, be upset by that. I would very much welcome that. And moreover, don't be shy about sending an email to introduce yourself and say, here are my, fields of interest, or I have a book coming out, or, those sorts of emails may feel strange to send, but they are very warmly received by me because I simply can't, meet everyone, but the more people who come into my field of orbit, the better for the health of book reviews.
This has been great. We've talked about what book reviews are, why they exist, what makes for a good one, why people should do them. Let's finish up with a slightly more challenging question. What happens when things go wrong? What are ways that the review process can go wrong? And what are the ways that you would ideally like reviewers responding?
Yeah, so kind of etiquette situations. I mean, one that I think comes up for a lot of us who have done book reviews is you've read a book, you don't like it, you know, and whatever your reasoning is, you are now faced with creating a book review that you are afraid is going to be extremely critical. And I already mentioned that critique is important. It's a central component of book reviewing. So you shouldn't feel afraid to offer a critique. And I mentioned also that it should generally be within the framework the author has offered. What I would suggest in those situations is to have a moment of self-reflection. You know, did something in the book trigger you and it's really upsetting you because of some larger issue you have with the field, and it's maybe less about this book and more just a trigger in general. Make sure you come back to the book itself and what the book is trying to achieve, and if it's achieved what it had set out to achieve. And then you can always turn in your review and ask me or ask the book review editor, you know, for specific tone edits, saying, you know, this may be a more critical review. Is it coming off in a professional manner? And finally, I would just say doing the kind of typical things that we do in our writing processes. Read the critical portion out loud to yourself. How bad does it sound? Could you say it to the author's face? If you know, because sometimes authors will come up to you at a conference and say, I read your critical review. Are you going to be able to stand by what you said? Is it fair? And, you know, just critique the way that you want to be critiqued by others. So that's one situation that comes up, I think, frequently for all of us. Another is something that I, you know, briefly mentioned before, which is a book review editor contacts you and you don't have time for the review in the moment. The best thing you can do is say no right away. If I send a request and I don't hear back, I have to wait 2 weeks essentially before I can move on. That really slows down the process, and we're trying to get these out as quickly as possible. So an immediate no is always better than a ghost. The other thing I would say there is, if at all possible, when you say no, offer other suggestions, because again, I'm just one person, and as much as I try to look at programs from conferences and look at essay collections and expand my orbit as much as possible, you know, people I don't know. So if you can just give a few names along with your no, I can look them up and see if they're appropriate for review. That would be a huge help. So saying no right away and offering suggestions if you can. And then the final etiquette issue that comes up, and this one I think can be very embarrassing if it happens to you. So I bring it up to relieve you of shame and embarrassment. That is, you have agreed to review a book, and at some point you find you can't fulfill your promise to review. You know, maybe a medical crisis has come up, whatever it is, you can't fulfill the review. That's fine, it happens. You should contact the review editor right away, say you can no longer do it, and then mail the book back, return the book so that it can be sent out to a new reviewer. Remember that, again, you might be embarrassed and hesitant to do it, but the author of the book may be a junior scholar who is counting on the review of their book appearing in the Journal of the Civil War Era. And for them, a late review is better than no review at all. So tell me right away, return the book, and there will be no hard feelings.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Katy. We are so grateful to you for your work as book review editor for the Journal of the Civil War Era. You're doing a wonderful job, and we hope that this session has been helpful for those of you who are watching, and help to demystify the process and explain why book reviews are so important, and help encourage people to offer to write book reviews or to say yes when a book review editor, particularly Katy Shively, contacts you. So please let us know. You can find all of our email addresses on our faculty web pages. So please feel free to be in touch with us, and particularly be in touch with Katy Shively. And we hope we'll see you before too long. Thanks so much.
Thank you.